Economic pressure is bearing down on Chinese people, and it's causing some to engage in heists and others in mass murder. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. And Chinese authorities would have you believe the country is one of the safest in the world. I assume they mean the country itself and not the waters surrounding it. And why not? China has tons of cameras and all sorts of other intrusive surveillance systems everywhere to keep you safe, of course. And when they arrest you for trying to make your voice heard, that's for your safety as well. All those independent thoughts might hurt your head, after all. Chinese media have plied onto the message, adding that theft is no longer the top crime, replaced by drunk driving. How wholesome! That the number of serious violent criminal cases, such as explosions and murders, have been decreasing. And that China has effectively curbed the threat of terrorism through so-called comprehensive governance, ignoring, of course, any terrorism performed by the CCP itself. China's low crime rate constantly gets hammered home in state-run media. So that, it would seem, is that China is so safe, they only have human rights lawyers to hand out lengthy jail terms to. This unbelievable crime-fighting success, emphasis on unbelievable, is apparently not just a result of excellent governance, but also a specific dynamic that, as Chinese society develops and living standards improve, the overall crime rate, particularly common criminal offenses, will decrease, according to a Chinese researcher and security expert. And luckily, Chinese leader Xi Jinping said in May that China's development is unstoppable and that no force can contain China's growth and progress. Yep, its growth and progress is absolutely uncontainable. Now, as the Chinese researcher indicated, there is in fact evidence suggesting that economic growth fueling improved living standards can lead to lower crime rates. And vice versa, there's evidence suggesting that difficult economic times can lead to an increase in crime rates. Unfortunately, it's here that the official Chinese low crime wonder story starts to run into a little roadblock called reality. You see, the Chinese economy is not doing well at all. China's growth numbers might look good on the surface, especially if you believe them, but behind the numbers is an unstable economy in deep trouble, and it's taking a toll on the Chinese people. In fact, many feel like the country is in a recession. And I'd say you can't go off feels and need to stick to facts, but the facts are basically illegal in China, so feels are all they got. These days, many are having to settle for less pay, as dwindling opportunities and weaker wage growth have left people worse off than during China's boom years. Unsurprisingly, data covering Chinese attitudes towards the economy have found that people are growing pessimistic and disillusioned about their prospects, probably more of that cursed reality seeping in. And coincidentally, at the same time, accounts are rolling in of Chinese people in economic distress turning to crime. Which is crazy because crime is against the law in China, and criminals would never break the law. Last month, Chinese social media overflowed with comments about the case of an indebted gold shop employee in the northwestern region of Xinjiang who had reportedly been apprehended by local authorities. It was revealed that she had stolen about 100 pounds of gold jewelry over 3 years, amounting to a value of around $2.7 million. According to the local authorities, the employee had worked together with her boyfriend, who was also buried in debt, to swap the gold for lead blocks of equal weight, which somehow deceived inspectors during inventory checks. The story drew so much attention online that even the low crime touting Global Times decided to run with the story. But hey, so what? That's a crazy story, but it's just a one-off, right? Well, no. This is just one of many shocking gold heist stories that have swept through Chinese social media in recent months, causing Scrooge McDuck to be grateful he didn't build his vault in Beijing. For instance, this bizarre one from back in December, when it was reported that a miner had stolen about 68 pounds of gold from his parents and sold them for the equivalent of about $800,000. A feat which astonished one Weibo user who said that when I was a kid, I stole $1 from my parents and was chased for 2 blocks and beaten with a belt. Kids these days. There's also this gold theft from earlier this year that began when the owner of a cosmetic business opened her safe and was stunned to find 15 gold bars missing. Less than a day later, an expensive designer watch of hers was suddenly gone as well. The police investigation later concluded that her boyfriend, who had initially called the police on her behalf, was the perpetrator behind the crime. Which is shocking, but also commendable that a man turned out to be a literal gold digger. Way to break gender norms, you feminist criminal icon. The boyfriend's business was reportedly going under, and he was selling the valuables to get the money he needed to keep the business afloat. But before you judge him, you should know that he also used some of it on travel with the girlfriend. What a gentleman. But for any gold grabbers being sent off to jail, it might not be so easy to find any cell space. An article asking the question of why are jails packed this year recently went viral on Chinese social media. The article claimed that economic pressure, a new strike hard campaign, and a wave of new criminalization of activities that used to be legal had created a perfect storm leading to overcrowded Chinese prisons. I guess it's a good thing they got so much practice on all those human rights lawyers. The article was, of course, quickly censored, and there's little way of knowing if its overall claim about packed jails was true. But the other claims about economic pressure, crackdowns, and criminalization are certainly accurate. Sadly, economic pressure and financial distress also seem to have set the stage for something much worse than gold thefts and stacked jails. And that thing is violent crime. In July, a knife attack took place at a metro station in Shanghai, with 3 people sustaining injuries before the culprit was apprehended by police. Discussions of the attack garnered around 164 million reads on the Chinese social media platform Weibo, where some suggested that the stabber had been a stockbroker battered during China's $7 trillion market meltdown earlier this year. Remember the good old days of the Great Depression when ruined stockbrokers decided to off themselves instead of other people? Then, at the end of last month, an even more devastating tragedy struck Shanghai when shoppers at Ludu International Shopping Plaza in the southwestern part of the city suddenly found themselves part of a real-life horror scene as a 37-year-old man surnamed Lin entered the mall and went on a stabbing spree. Before Lin surrendered to local police, he had stabbed 18 people, 3 of whom died from their wounds. The next day, Shanghai police said that Lin had come to Shanghai with the aim of venting his anger due to a personal economic dispute, which I guess is a slightly better motive than the typical one Chinese police cite, revenge on society, which I did a whole episode on. Anyway, case closed. Around 12 hours after the deadly attack, the blood had been mopped up and the plaza was open for business as usual. It was as if the carnage had never happened. Which is crazy, because when has China ever swept a massacre under the rug? But even though the Chinese authorities were clearly eager to pretend like the stabbing spree was just a bad dream, the victims and Chinese social media users weren't. Soon after, what appears to be a leak of the official police report regarding Lin began to circulate online. In it, Lin is described as a destitute worker that had come to Shanghai to find his boss, who owed him the equivalent of almost $5,700 in unpaid wages. Unable to locate the boss, Lin grew increasingly desperate and even had to sell his phone to scrape by. At the end, he decided to give up and instead take revenge against society using 2 knives that were among the last of his possessions. Former journalist and current affairs blogger Zhang Feng is one of the people that looked into the facts behind the tragedy, and in doing so, he made it clear on the multi-platform WeChat that he was in no way defending Lin's actions, but that it was still important to try to understand how such a tragedy could happen. Fortunately, few people in Lin's situation have acted out in the inexcusable way that he did. Unfortunately, there are many Chinese people in a similar situation as him. Just like some Chinese are struggling with personal debt and keeping their businesses afloat in China's ailing economy, countless Chinese workers are struggling with unpaid wages. But I don't know why they're so upset. Xi Jinping told them to embrace hardship. They can just eat patriotism and national loyalty. That's high in calories, right? Videos constantly pop up on Chinese social media of disgruntled workers confronting managers and bosses over low wages and unpaid salaries. Like this one from last year that ended in managers beating the workers that had demanded their wages. Man, it seems like the workers need to seize the means of production and overthrow the oppressive upper class. Oh, wait. For China's hundreds of millions of workers employed under comparable circumstances. It can be quite difficult to do much if they suddenly don't get paid. While China, in theory, has labor protection laws, they are poorly enforced, and there is a complete lack of independent and effective labor unions. Wait, there are no labor unions in communist China? I'd say they're doing communism wrong, except it ends this way every time, every single time. At the same time, local governments who oversee the enforcement of law and order are often on very good terms with the heads of local companies, which are known to invest heavily in such relationships by providing things like travel, dining, and entertainment for local officials. Doesn't bode well for workers if the manager they're confronting about unpaid wages is the entertainment and vacation sponsor of the police force that is about to arrive. And doesn't help that some of China's largest property developers, which are among the biggest direct and indirect employers of Chinese workers, have been unable to pay their creditors, let alone their workers, as construction projects have stalled. It's gotten so bad that even in China, which is well known for its tolerant attitude towards protests, struggling Chinese, from construction and factory workers to teachers and hospital staff, are trying to raise awareness of their plight and demand their rights by engaging in a growing number of labor protests. In fact, labor protests more than tripled in the fourth quarter of 2023 compared with the same period in 2022, according to rights groups. And such protests have continued to spread this year. That says a lot, considering that protesting in China can come with a high cost for the people involved. Boy, doesn't China seem like a safe, chill place to visit. The thing is that the struggling Chinese economy is not just putting tremendous pressure on Chinese people, it's also exposing major government failings. Failings that were hidden during the economic boom years when there was plenty to go around. But now, the party is over, and we're seeing the shortcomings of years of bad economic policies from the Chinese Communist Party. Focusing on large-scale industrial visions and allocating capital to lead and dominate modern science, technology, and innovation in the global system at the cost of China's workers and consumers on the ground. While this might have helped create so-called islands of technological dominance, these now exist in a sea of wider imbalances and troubles. China has a thing about causing trouble in seas, don't they? Troubles like a weak consumer confidence approaching an all-time low, and housing spending that is well below the global average. Both are a huge problem, with economists pointing out that to ensure long-term development, China has to significantly boost household consumption and make it a central pillar driving economic growth. But under the CCP, China is clearly miles away from that mark, especially when workers that are supposed to contribute to that household spending literally have to take a beating to try to secure their wages, either from their employers or from the Chinese authorities. By prioritizing its global ambitions over the Chinese people, the CCP has distorted the economy so much that it has cut off the core source of future economic growth and left some Chinese people falling into such deep economic despair that it's threatening public safety. And it doesn't matter how many security cameras and facial recognition systems you have set up if the people prepared to commit terrible crimes have nothing to lose. And here's a video I think you'll like. You want an inside look on what's been happening as the CCP slowly disintegrated Hong Kong? Well, on our podcast, China Unscripted, we interviewed Hong Kong's last British governor, Lord Chris Patten, and he had some pretty insightful things to tell us. Click here to check it out. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.